So one more time, thank you for attending. It's a great pleasure to be here. Simon already introduced me. So I'm from Portugal, Microsoft and Power BI professional. I've worked with Microsoft BI all my career. I'm really passionate about everything related to data and communities. That's one of the reasons why I got this award that I'm very honored from Microsoft, the MVP award, because of all the work into the community. So the session today, and it's about Power BI monitoring 101. So the reason is this is something that I think and I believe it's really important whenever you work with Power BI to monitor what is happening inside your tenant. So I will start to describe why you need this. Then I will jump directly to the final demo, so show you the end result, and then we will discuss how to do it. This is a 50-minute session, so we won't have time to focus on the details, but please focus on the possibilities, not the how to do it, because in the end, you can send me an email and I'll share my contacts with you and I will share the code and the Power BI files, so don't worry about understanding every detail. Worry more about understanding why you need it, and then, of course, the how to do it. I will describe, there are multiple ways to do it. I will show a very simplistic one with PowerShell scripts, but there are others, and we will discuss them also. So why you need to do this? So if you work in a company and you are developing Power BI reports, or you are responsible for the Power BI tenant, if you are the IT admin, and you cannot answer these questions. So if you cannot answer what's the most active user in your organization, and why you need to know the most active user or users is, for example, if you want to just activate a new feature, and Power BI is adding new features every month, maybe those are the set of users that you should speak to. And another very important question is how many users use Power BI in your tenants? How many distinct users use it per day and per hour? And this is very important. If you, for example, if you have a premium capacity, this is something that is very important to know, because this can determine if you need more or less vCores, if you are overbuying, or if you are or maybe you need more and you have 1,000 distinct users per hour, and then maybe one P1 is not enough. Another important question is, how is the content being shared? So maybe you design some guidelines to use workspaces and data workspaces and report workspaces, and then use apps to publish and broadcast your Power BI content to users. And are actually the developers following those guidelines? Or not, or no? So it's something. So how is the content being delivered to the end users? You can also monitor that. Do your users use published web, and maybe you don't want them to use, or maybe who is doing published web and sharing those reports with to the public? So it's something that it's important for you to know. Even if you authorize published web in your company or in your tenants, it's important to know who is doing it. What do exist in the personal workspaces? One of the things that it's not actually recommended or as a best practice is to create reports in the personal workspace and then share those reports with other users. So you can create reports on your personal workspace, but if you share those reports, then maybe you should think, or you should plan to put those reports into workspaces, not the personal workspace, because if you leave the company, then that personal account will get deleted, and you could lose some work there. And you can monitor, of course, what do exist in the personal workspace, and if there is some activity in those personal workspaces. I've seen situations in companies where the most active report was actually a report from a personal workspace, and this is not good. And you need to know about this. Another thing is that the top used data sources. What are the most active data source in your tenant? Is it files? Is OneDrive? Is SQL Server database? Is it data lake? Maybe you could want to not authorize the use of file system and force your users to use OneDrive or another cloud service, because you don't want them to have some critical or Power BI developments that just connect to a local file system. Maybe you just want to, and then you can design some guidelines that you give to your end users, and if those and if you detect this kind of situations where you detect there is a data set with a data source with a C or D drive, then you can just provide those guidelines and they will be able to migrate their Power BI development. So you should look at the data set refreshes. So what's the trend? So do you have a data set refresh that is growing in the amount of seconds it takes to refresh every day? And you should be able to look at this at the tenant level, so for all the data sets that exist in your tenant. So what do your users use the most to access Power BI? Do they come from mobile applications? Do they use Excel? From the browser? Which browser do they use? And the browser is something that is important for you as a Power BI admin to know, because I don't know if that still happens, but it happened to me a year ago. I used Firefox, and Firefox, I don't know why, it made Power BI slow. And I think it was the Power BI service that was slow, but that was not the case. So, and maybe you are getting complaints from users that Power BI is slow, and maybe that's because of the browser. So, and you can react to this, you can use this information to when you get this complaint, to understand, okay, maybe they are using old browsers, and that could be the issue. And another thing that is also important to monitor is which data sets and reports are not actually being used in more than 1 year. You should think into deprecating those reports. And last but not the least, do you have users with a paid license that don't use Power BI in more than 3 months or more than a year, and you are paying for those licenses, and then you have a set of 10 or 100 users asking you for licenses, and you are not giving them a license because you don't have more, but then you have users that they have a license that they don't use it. So this is a collection of questions that it's really, really important. And I think that I won't say Power BI developer, but if you are in any kind responsible for the Power BI tenant, you should be able to answer, and you should look at this. I won't say every day, but you should at least look at this data frequently and make some decisions, and more informed decisions with this. And if you cannot answer these questions, then you are literally driving blind, and there is certainly a big reality check ahead of you. And I can tell you from experience that if you don't look at this data, what you think is important, maybe it's not. Maybe you are designing mobile reports and no one is using mobile. You are spending time and money designing those reports, and it's not important. So, and maybe you should be, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't design mobile reports. You should, but maybe you should wonder why they are not using mobile reports. Maybe your end users just don't know about this. So in this session the main goal of this session is just to show you what you can do with this data, and to show you the importance of looking at this data. So before going into the solution, the custom solution, so there is nothing out of the box with the same level of deep analytical into the activity and the catalog out of the box, but there are some things out of the box that you should know of. So the first one, and it's actually very nice, but it has two main limitations. It's the Power BI report usage. So if you go to the Power BI report and you click on on the open usage metrics, this will open a report like this, and this will give you, for the reports and all the reports in the workspace, some activity information. So you'll be able to see the report views. You will be able to see some telemetry data, the time to open a report, which is something that I can actually, in my solution, I cannot get, because I cannot get that telemetry information with the APIs. But the limitation of this solution is it will only give you 7 days of data, and it's workspace by workspace. So if you want to look at this at the tenant level, there is no way. So you need to create multiple data sets by workspace. And I work with companies with 1,000 workspaces, and this is impossible to manage. There is actually a tenant level monitoring solution at the admin portal, but in here you don't have any interactivity. So you cannot control the refresh of this data. I can actually sometimes, I don't actually trust really much these counters here. I have some differences, and I've checked, and the API data is more correct than this. But nevertheless, it's something that is available out of the box, and it will give you at least the number of reports, the number of data sets, and you can at least get an idea of what's happening in the tenant. So this is what is available out of the box. Now, let me show you what you can do if you collect this data and the potential of what you can analyze with it. So this is a Power BI report. So this is the Power BI report that I built. One more time. I can share this Power BI file with you, no issue, but let's start with the activity. One of the things that you can get from the Power BI as an admin is what is happening in your tenant. And what's the activity? The activity is if a user opens a report, this will create a line saying that user A at this time, at this date, it opened this report from this workspace, from this client IP address, from this user agent. So you get all that information as in a table that will get you. So this is the actual activity operation. So you get a lot of information from the activity log. So you can get that. You can take that information and you can build some dashboard like this, where you will be able to, for example, just give you a trend. So I actually have a positive trend. So I even have a KPI for that. It's a positive trend. It's a line chart. I can just see, okay, my activity, my tenant activity is growing. I'm also using some very cool feature from Power BI in line charts, that is anomaly detection. So I have 5 anomalies. So what is an anomaly? Is something that so Power BI expected, and is saying that over here, it has a value of 1,912 logs, but it was expecting this amount of logs. So this is an anomaly. And you can click on that anomaly, and you can see. So for example, in this anomaly, on this point, there was a lot of generated embed tokens. If I go to the next day, this generated embed tokens that doesn't exist. That's the reason why it was that anomaly. So this is something that just out of the box, a line chart, it will just generate that anomalies for you. Then I have 3 KPIs that I think it's important to monitor. The activity trend, I just want to know, okay, am I growing or not in terms of activity? For example, if I switch this to the data view, data views is actually it's scaling, so I don't have a lot of more activity in data view. But if I go to authoring, so if I want to measure the creation, the edit reports, the delete of reports, then the authoring is growing. So the distinct users. So in my company, since November, so I have data since November last year, I had 89 distinct users accessing Power BI. But in a single day, the average is 20. So on average, I never add more than 20 users per day. And another thing that I can see here on the right is per hour. So on per hour, I have most of my activity during the morning and the afternoon, but I never had more than 60 in a single hour. And on average, I have, for example, at the most active hour is at 10 a.m. On average, there are 6 users in my tenant. So this is very important information for you to know, for example, for the planning some premium capacity. So how many distinct users you really have? And another thing that I didn't mention, and it's really important about the activity, is if you are not collecting and you are not storing this data, you are losing the data because you can only go back 30 days. So one of the things that you can get out of this session is if you are not collecting and storing this data, if no one is doing that in your company, you are losing some very, very valuable information that you can use in the future to plan. So just please collect and store it, even if it's on the file system or a drive. Just collect and store it because maybe in the future you will need it. Then this chart over here, it can also give me a lot of information. So I can see that the data per month. Of course, this is Power BI. I can drill down per day. I can even drill down per hour if I want. But let's see this per month because it's more easy it's more aggregated. So I can see a lot of data in here. So I can see the trend per month. So I can see the amount of distinct users per month. So in February, I'm actually growing the amount of users from January to February. One thing that I like to do is I can come here and I can look at, okay, I just want to look at data views. So what is a data view? It's a view of the report. It's an analyze in Excel. It's view of a dashboard. So and the data views, it's actually it has not a positive trend, so it's not growing. But if I want to look at authoring, because maybe I have done a lot of trainings in my company and I want to know if the activity is growing. So I had a spike in December. In January, it's the same, but in February it dropped. And another thing that I can do in Power BI that is really, really interesting is it dropped in January to February. I want to know why. And I can come here and say, okay, explain me why it decreased, why the logs of authoring decreased from one month to the other. And Power BI will just do some machine learning and try to do detect some patterns in the data to explain that increase. And they will tell me things like, okay, the weekday 5, it was actually what contributed the most for this decrease. On Friday, Simone, which is a user, and this demo user, they used a lot in January, but they didn't use it a lot in February. I really like to look at this visual like this because everything that is on the green, it actually has a positive impact. Everything that is on the red, it has a negative impact. So like you can even just do over the dot, and you will be able to see that from one month to the other. Simone in January has 71 logs, and in February only 21 in terms of authoring. So this everything, it will keep all that entire context. So this chart over here gives you a lot of information. So it gives you an aggregation of the operations. It gives you the amount of distinct users per day and per month, and you can, of course, drill down as I showed you. And then, of course, so this is where we are just looking at the time patterns, but you can also look. Oh, sorry, I don't know what's happening. Okay, Power BI is a little bit slow right now. Okay, so you can of course look at the data. Let's see for a user. So I can click on my user and see all the activity that my user is doing. So I can see it by day. I can see the activity per workspace. So Manager Cockpit is the most active workspace. I can see the by apps, Power BI apps. So Manager Cockpit app has a lot of activity in my user, and I can do the other way around. So I can click on the Manager Cockpit app and see which users use this application. And do they use the browser or they use mobile? So the application, the reports that exist in the Power BI, in this Power BI application, it's important to design mobile reports because there are a lot of users that use mobile. One of them is the CEO. So it's really, really important to design a mobile application because the CEO doesn't access the Power BI from almost any other format and device than a mobile. But if we click, let's say, on BI ETL framework, then I'm the only one that uses mobile. So you can do this. You can analyze this data whatever format you want, because then this is Power BI, so this is very interactive. So you can just click and drag and click and drill through to the data to make some specific analysis. So one thing that you can also do in here is I can click on this app, I can click on the user, and then I can even go to the most granular detail. I can just right click, drill through activity detail, and this will jump to another page that will give me, for my user, for that report, for that application, what every log that it has available. And of course, we can export this data and send it for let's say, an audit operation. So maybe someone left your company and it was asked to the Power BI admin, okay, I just want to know which reports that user just saw or viewed or exported data in the last 3 months. So you can very quickly, just with a few clicks, get that and provide that information. So activity overview, there are many other things that you can do in here. I'm not going to show you every single one, but I think that you get the point. So you can just explore all the activity of what is happening inside your tenant. Then I also have a page I call report activities. So report, it's probably the most used asset in Power BI, so maybe the most important one. And this is just focusing on the reports, because the activity over here, this is not just reports. So if I could just look, okay, show me who is doing some export activity events. And this is not users. So this is service principals or admin accounts or service accounts that they are doing export operations. So activity, don't confuse with a report activity or opening report. It's everything that is happening in the tenant, even from service accounts. So report activity, in here, it's just reports. So I'm filtering this. I'm using the same data, but in this time I'm just filtering what is happening on the reports. And I can see that, okay, what's the most active distribution method? What's the most active user of reports? I can click on the user and I can see which reports that user is looking at. If I unclick the user, I will be able to see what's the most active report, and does it have a positive or negative trend? And I can click it and I can see that, yes, it has a positive trend. And on every report, I can click and see which are the most active devices being used for that report. So this is just centered on reports. Then another thing that you can get from the Power BI API is another important data aside the activity is the metadata. What do exist in your tenants? So how many workspaces, how many dashboards, how many reports, how many data sets? On the workspaces, how many personal workspaces do you have with Power BI content in it? And you can click and see those personal workspaces. Do you have any Office 365 old workspaces that you need to migrate to the new to the V2 version? Where are they? What do they have? And of course, the normal workspaces. Who is the most active user creating data sets in your company? So this is just catalog data. So in here, we don't have any activity. This is just showing you what to exist in tenant. So this report, it's very valuable if you go to the filters and someone complain about the report and you just want to know more information from that report using the GUID or using the name. You receive an email on the premium capacity saying that a specific data set is generating a lot of some performance issues, you can just filter that data set and understand where that data set is, and at least know the workspace where it exists. Now, another thing that you can also get from this metadata is data sources. So you can get all the data sets, and then for all the data sets, all the data sources that exist in the tenant. And you can see, for example, that in DevScope tenant, we have a lot of data sources from files. I can click here and I'd be able to see which files, who is the creator of the data set, which workspace, and of course for SQL databases. So I want to just look at the SQL databases, which databases are actually being used. And another thing that I also like about this report over here is I can just come here and select and search for a specific server that I know, and I want to know which data set is connecting to those servers, and I can just type the name and see the server and the database or the data sets connecting to this database just by using a search. So this is very useful when you just want to know, okay, I want to know which data sets are just connecting to my production database. And you put the IP address over there or the data source name and just filter it. Now, another thing that and since we are speaking about data sets, it's really important to look at is the refresh operation. So all the refreshes that is happening in your tenant, you can get that refresh history. So this is the actual refresh history. So you can get, okay, at what time it started, what time it ended, the duration it took, if there is an error or not, if it was on demand or scheduled. And you can take this information and you can look at it. So you can see, okay, I want to, so let's say, click on this report over here, and I want to know how many refreshes it's run in the last couple of days, how much time it took. So this data set, it's not a big deal. So it's actually taking the same level or more or less the same amount of time to refresh. If it failed, you can get the logs of the failure. I can get the actual per hour activity. So this data set is refreshing through the day for every 2 hours or so. But you can look at this more in a smarter way, like, okay, I actually created a calculation column that is a standard deviation of each refresh. And I can say, okay, I want to look at data sets with the standard deviation from the mean between 700 and 1000. And why this is important? Because, okay, it selected these data sets over here, and then I can just click on the data set, and I will be able to see that this data set, Power BI governance, it has a strange refresh time. So sometimes it's 2000 seconds, other times it's 300. Maybe this data set has some incremental refresh that, by the way, it doesn't. So this is not normal. So you can look at this data from a top level view and just, okay, calculate some measures that will do that standard deviation, and you can spot some strange things that are happening on your tenant. But to be honest, the most active usage that I get from here is just selecting a workspace or a data set. So this is actually it has a drill down from the data set from the workspace to the data set. I can click, okay, on the workspace here, and I can see all the data sets. So each line is a data set, and see the trends of the refresh, every refresh that happened. So this is something that helps me a lot. The last thing that is also important as a metadata to look at is the users and roles. So every workspace, it has a specific set of permissions. So on every workspace, you can have admins, contributors, members, and views. And this report here, it will get the data for the user configuration of each workspace, and it will give you what's that configuration. So this workspace Power BI portal, it has 9 users. Those 9 users, these are the actual users. So from those 9 users, 7 is admin. We have 3 service principals or 4 service principals configured, and I have 1 security group. And this is very important also for auditing. And sometimes I have customers that just take this report, and every time someone is asked what's the distribution of users between the users' roles and workspaces, and export this data and provide it to someone. But this can give you, you can look also at this report as a best practice appliance. So for example, we have a lot of things, a lot of admin, so maybe this is not normal. And we should look at it. So we have a small amount of viewers, which in our case it's normal because we do a lot of consultancy, and most of the time we just create a workspace and we are the admins of the workspace. The last thing that I want to show you is users and licenses. So if you take, and this is not coming from the Power BI API, so you need to go to the Graph API, and you will get from all the users in your company, you will get the licenses that they have. And then you can cross this data, and you can relate this data to the activity. And this is where you get the most value, because in here, now I can, okay, let me just show, I want to show users without Power BI activity. So these users, they don't use Power BI, and they have a paid Power BI license. So in these users, they never used Power BI since ever, and we are paying a license for them. So maybe we should consider just removing the license and assigning to someone else. So this is another thing that when you relate the activity with the licensing, you can make some better decisions on the licensing assignments. Okay. So, and this is a report. So I'm sure that I missed some analysis here, but I think that you get the point of what you can do. And one more time, you can look at this in many perspectives. You can look at this at the admin perspective. You can look at this at the user or the report creator perspective. Like, I am the manager of a team, and I want to just monitor if my end users, if my team is using the report that I built. So this is not only for admins. So you can apply row-level security and just give access to the report creator to the activity of their report. Okay. So this is the end result. So you cannot go, this is what you can do with the data. Of course, that you can build your own reports, and you can do whatever other analysis that you want. So let's Simon, can you how much time do I have?
You have around 10 minutes, 8 minutes, 7 to 8 minutes.
Okay. So one more time. This is what I showed you the end result. So how can you do this? How can you collect this data and store this data? So this is one example of the architecture that I can share with you, and you can just start running it today. The only thing that you need is a service principal. You need to create a service principal on your Azure. I have on the slides, I have the steps to do it. And I have 3 scripts. So or 4 scripts. So 2 scripts to collect the metadata, 2 PowerShell scripts to collect the metadata, then another PowerShell script to collect the activity, what is happening in your tenant, and another PowerShell script to collect the users and the licenses. In the end, you can store that data in the file system, and Power BI will connect to that folder and just give you the same report that I was showing you. Of course, that if you want to do it in a more professional way, that's not the case. So if you want, I would recommend you to use Azure for it. So you can do this with whatever language or or cloud that you want. The only requirement is you need to call API. You need to be able to call an API and store the data. So normally in my customers, what I do is I use an Azure function that will collect this data every hour. It will store it in the data lake, and then Power BI will connect to the data lake. You can also use another tools like Data Factory. There is a blog post by Just, the link is on the slides, that it has a blog series in how to collect and store this data using Data Factory. So if you are more into Data Factory, I would recommend you to look at it. So this is the APIs that you need to use. So for the Power BI metadata, you need to use a new Power BI admin scan APIs that will just do a scanning over all your tenants. It's really awesome. It's a really awesome API because on the first time it will get everything, but then you can provide a timestamp, and it will only give you the workspaces that change it since the last time that you collected the data. There are some things that I still need to use the old get groups as admin API that will give me all the workspaces in the tenant, and I need to loop those workspaces because, for example, for the Power BI metadata API, there is no way to get the refresh of the data sets as an admin. So you need to actually get the groups as the admin and then loop and for each data set and workspace and call the refreshes API for those workspaces. And you need to make sure that the account that is running the script, it has a permission to get the data. And the activity log is another API from the Power BI admin called activity events. For the graph, for the users and licenses, I'm just using the graph API. So these APIs, they are pretty well documented. So I have the links on the slides, but for example, for the activity, this will show you what type of get statement you need to do, get request you need to do, and it will show you the payload that will reply. One more time, you can call this in whatever language that you want. You just need to be able to call this API. So one thing that it's important to discuss is the authentication. So all these APIs, they use OAuth 2.0 to do the authentication. My recommendation is to use the client credential flow. The client credential flow will force you to create something that is called the service principal. So you need to go to your Azure Active Directory, you create a service principal, and after you create that service principal, you save the application ID, secret, and the tenant ID. You need to create also a security group and add that service principal to the security group. And on the Power BI admin portal, you need to allow that security group and, of course, the service principal to access your Power BI admin APIs. So, and after you do it, and that is a lot of blog posts from the community that explain how to create the service principal, but it's these 8 steps. And after you do it, you don't need, so you have everything you need to run the scripts that I can share with you to collect this data and extract the data and store the data. So for the storing the data, I will just briefly go through the script. So the 4 scripts, the Power BI, the fetch activity, one more time, you can only go back 30 days. So if you're not collecting this data, you will lose the data. The catalog, so this is, none of these scripts is too complex. So it's PowerShell because I'm more comfortable with PowerShell, but one more time, you can do it whatever language you want, or you can use another tool that can call an API like an Azure Factory to collect the data. So I have those 4 scripts, the catalog, the activity, the refresh. For the refresh, it's important to state that there is no admin API to collect this data. So you need to make sure that the service principal has access to the workspace. There is also another script that I share is it's a script that will go to all the workspaces as the admin and make sure that the service principal has access to the workspace before running the scripts if you want if the refresh operation is something that you want to analyze. And of course, the Graph API. The Graph API, it's for Microsoft. It's a very important API to just collect to your Azure Active Directory and to connect to your Office 365 information and collect these users and licenses information from there. One thing to be in mind is the API throttling. So all of the Power BI APIs and the Graph APIs, they have throttling enabled. So you might get this 499 error, too many requests. All the Power BI APIs, whenever they have throttling, they state the amount of requests that you can make per hour. It's a generous throttling. So I only got throttled in tenants with, let's say, 50,000 workspaces with a lot of data sets. So on a normal tenant, I would say 1,000 workspaces, and you don't get this throttling. But if you get this throttling, in the code, in the PowerShell code that I provide you, I actually handle the throttling. So and whenever you get the throttling, you need to wait to make the next request. So, and after that, you collect this data and you store the data. Then you have the data sets. On the data set in the Power Query, I just want to mention something that is important. This Power Query, the Power BI implementation, might sound too complex, but one of the things that it's important just to notice is I use a technique called the file proxy. And this Power BI file is ready if I want to switch the location where the files reside. If I want to switch the location from the files from the file system to a data lake, I just need to switch one Power Query called the file proxy, and I just uncomment one and comment the other, and I can switch the location of the files between a folder and a data lake. So this is my way to have a single development for the multiple data sources. I have a video, there is a link here that where I explain this technique. So the Power BI dataset is very simplistic. I have two data sets in one. One focuses on data catalog and another focuses on the activity. And then the report, it's what I showed you. I won't go into too much details on it. So I already explained to you all the pages and what you can do with them. And this is it. So I know it was really fast in the part of the code, but I'm sure that if you have someone that can write code or just understand PowerShell, it will be very easy to understand it. But my only take from this session is, if you are not doing it, if Power BI is important to you, just do it, because it will be worth it. And thank you.